Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. You've just clicked on the last of a 3-part series on my deep dive into how languages impact personality and identity. In the first video, I deep dived into myself and detailed my own experience with this and what theories I had for it. In the second video, I gave examples of ways that linguistic, nonverbal, and cultural influences contribute to this effect. And in this video, I'm going to show you how it all comes together with the way that your mind uses and organizes all of your lived experiences to create your concept of identity. And you know, I wasn't really expecting to share my whole life story with the internet anytime soon, but I think going through a timeline of a person's life and seeing the significance of how different experiences and situations contributed to my identity, or should I say, identities, would make the most sense. So, let's get into it. The baby phase. For me, the baby phase is characterized by memories of hearing my mom's voice, being taken care of and being the center of attention, playing with toys, and so on. It's also the time of my life when I was learning to speak and use language for the first time, and that language for me happened to be Russian. Now you might ask, how is this significant at all? This is significant because all of these experiences become related and intricately bound together. These childhood emotions, loving caresses, family voices, the smells of their clothes and their cooking, all these feelings like perceptual sensory information, places, and language all become tied together. So going forward, whenever you see your mom, you tend to just automatically speak Russian to her. And then whenever you speak Russian, you recall and almost relive all of the experiences that are associated with it. Alright, so next up is the child phase. In this phase, I was going to school for the first time, making friends and sometimes enemies, experiencing new kinds of feelings like embarrassment and discomfort, learning to be a bit more okay with parents not constantly around, learning a ton of new information and skills from so many sources, and for me, all in a completely new language. At some point, because my experiences were so much more varied and I was learning so much more in English, I was more comfortable expressing a lot of new ideas in English, and because of that, I have a very distinct memory of being at home and trying to talk to my mom in English and her completely ignoring me unless I would talk to her in Russian or ask how to say what I wanted to say in Russian. So because my two languages were now separated by context, with my mom enforcing Russian at home and with English being enforced at school, I likely developed what's called a coordinate linguistic context. In a coordinate context, a bilingual maintains two independent linguistic schemes to separately process information. They tend to take minimal or no use of translation, and they generally speak both languages well with minimal interference. And this observed distinctiveness of the two languages here is referred to as the language independence phenomenon, which basically just suggests that experiences and memories are stored and mediated separately by both languages. And this is an extremely critical concept because that essentially means that you, who you are, is a combination of all of the different mini yous of each language that you speak that all coexist in your identity and self-concept. Although there has been some pushback on the idea, there are just too many pieces of evidence in support of it to ignore. For example, some of my favorite things that I've learned are 1. In bilinguals with schizophrenia, not only did they tend to have auditory hallucinations in just one language, but also the way that they described these hallucinations and how they seemed to them was different depending on which language it was in. 2. In cases of brain damage which cause some loss of ability to understand or express speech, not all languages are affected equally. Depending on the injury and the person, it was either the most recently acquired languages or the least used languages that were the ones that suffered. Additionally, coordinate versus compound people I'll explain what the latter means real soon. They were affected by the condition differently, and they also recovered differently. 3. For bilinguals asked to tell the same story, once in their L1 and once in their L2, you'd think the story was being told by completely different people with different backgrounds, morals, personalities. For example, in a study with Portuguese-French bilinguals, one woman's Portuguese story made listeners describe her as polite, calm, respectful, diplomatic. But her French retelling of the same exact story led them to characterize her as angrier, aggressive, vulgar, critical, self-assertive, and explosive. Also funnier. What's really important to realize here is that these bilinguals didn't just translate the story from one language to another in their retelling of it. They actually recreated and performed this past experience in their two different selves that came alive for both themselves and for the people listening to it. It's just incredibly cool. Okay, so next up is the teenager phase. Puberty, awkwardness, acne, the growing importance of social life, friends, romantic crushes, rebelling against your parents, and learning a new foreign language at school for free. Yeah, I know, I'm a nerd like that. So the first most obvious thing here is that my learning of French at school completely coincides with all the feelings that I had and experienced during adolescence, but also with the classroom environment itself. So my French self is very much tied to that part of my life and who I was and how I felt back then. And as for the second thing, recall how I already have a separate coordinate context between English and Russian, right? Now here, the fact that my learning of French was isolated to strictly a classroom setting, where English was also used as the language of instruction, I likely developed a fused or compound context between French and English. In this kind of fused context, a bilingual has like a single place where information is represented, and one language has a dependence on the other to access that information. So it's almost like when I was speaking French, I was actually speaking English in my head and then translating that into French before actually saying it. And same with listening. If I was hearing French input, I would be hearing this and translating it into English to actually gather the meaning and understand it. And lastly, the young adult phase. This final phase is all about independence and embracing who you really are and figuring out who you really want to be. It's dealing with new problems, people and situations all on your own now, and making your own decisions. One of such decisions that I made in college was to start learning Chinese. And actually, once I started taking Chinese in college, something really weird started to happen, where I would often get Chinese and French to mix. For example, I was trying to speak French to one of my Francophone friends in college at one point, but all that was coming to my mind was the Chinese word for everything. I used to describe this feeling as kind of having like a language file system in my head, where I have like my native languages. So I have English, Russian, and then I have foreign languages. Just the first two, the native languages, never have any issues. They never like get mixed up. Nothing ever bleeds into anything else. But when I want to speak in any like learned language, it's as if just anything from that folder, whatever is the most prominent thing that is connected to the meaning of what I want to say, or the thing that's like most recently been used, that's the thing that's gonna come at me. But yes, so that made me think that maybe my brain is somehow organized like per language. And as it turns out, I'm not too far off from that. There are a couple theories on how memory is organized in a bilingual context, which is beyond fascinating to me. But the theory that makes the most sense to me personally is the one that purports some common unitary memory structure that is shared between languages, with some semantic representations remaining interdependent, but orthographic and phonemic representations remaining independent. So essentially you can access all of these same memories with either language, but some of the meaning and those kind of aspects of the memory could be different depending on which language you choose to access it. And this is completely in line with what we saw right before with the Portuguese-French bilinguals and their storytelling. And it genuinely supports the idea of having distinct language-related selves. To get a tiny bit further into this language memory structure thing, and I want to combine it with what we know about the coordinate and compound relationships that we have with our languages. So in these relationships that we have with our languages actually determine the way and extent to which our memories can be accessed linguistically. After all, like, a memory is composed of the emotions you felt at the time, the perceptual, sensory feelings that you had at the time, and the language that was used at the time, or the language that you used to describe that experience to yourself at the time. So if the language that you're trying to use to access some particular memory doesn't match the language with which that memory was associated with, aka the language that that memory was organized and stored with, then technically the memory is incomplete. And this is something huge that causes problems for bilingual patients during therapy, because sometimes the patient will intentionally refuse to use the language of the experience to distance themselves from it and avoid reliving it in any way possible. And in other cases, which is probably a lot more common, but I don't know, some people, they don't even know that they are missing out on entire full memories of experience or parts of memories that they do have access to, just because they're trying to think about them in the wrong language. So yeah, literally every part of your life and experience impacts how you think and organize your memories, which then forever continues to impact your life in this infinite cycle of experience to brain to experience. And then when you add a bunch of languages into the mix, it further splits and reorganizes all of these memories, which further contributes to our multiple identities and self-concepts. So if you've now watched this 3-part series of mine, hopefully you now know and clearly understand how and why we feel different in different languages. If you're really interested in this topic and into looking a little bit deeper, I highly recommend starting with some of the resources that I used, and I made a bibliography of all of those and I put them in a link down in the description below, so you can feel free to check that out. If you liked this video, please make sure to leave a like and a comment down below with your thoughts, and for more videos from me, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. It really helps support me and means a lot. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!